You don't owe anyone a blueprint of your mind. You don't need to tell the world how you feel, what you're planning, or what keeps you up at night. The idea that transparency equals strength is a trap. What makes you powerful is knowing what to share, when to share, and more importantly, who to share it with. And if you don't have clarity on that, you'll keep putting your business in the hands of people who have no business holding it. The more you talk, the more you reveal. The more you reveal, the more exposed you are. And exposure is not always about truth. It's about vulnerability, about giving people tools they didn't earn, about letting them walk into spaces in you they're not equipped to handle. You have to understand this. People are listening for different reasons. Some are listening to learn. Others are listening to use. And most people can't tell the difference until it's too late. You think they care, so you share. You think they'll protect it, so you open up. But not everyone has your intentions. Some people are just gathering data. Emotional data, strategic data, information they can pull out when it's time to cut you down or control the narrative. You handed them the file. Don't be surprised when they open it in front of an audience. There's nothing noble about bleeding in public, when no one in the crowd knows how to stop the bleeding. Keep your circle tight and your insight tighter. If someone hasn't shown the discipline to guard your name when you're not in the room, why would you trust them with your raw truth in private? Silence is your gatekeeper. And when you lead with silence, you control the pace of connection. You don't have to rush intimacy. You don't have to fast-track vulnerability. The people meant for you will be patient. They'll earn access. And the ones who disappear when you withhold your story, let them go. That's not a loss. That's clarity. Privacy isn't avoidance. It's power. It means you're not leaking energy. You're not trying to manage perceptions. You're not making your healing a performance. You're doing the work without an audience. That's rare. Most people want to be seen fixing things more than they want to fix them. They confuse exposure with accountability. But here's the truth. What you protect holds value, and the things you keep sacred don't need applause. They need discipline. You're not hiding. You're guarding. You're filtering. You're moving in silence, not because you're scared, but because you understand that loud plans invite interference. The less they know, the less they can control. The less they know, the less they can mimic. The less they know, the more you stay centered. When you stop oversharing, you start managing your energy. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop feeding people your next step and start building in peace. There's no pressure to prove when no one knows what you're building. There's no anxiety about failure when no one knows what you're working on. That's freedom. That's control. And in a world where everyone is shouting to be seen, your silence is disruptive. You'll notice something powerful when you speak. Less people lean in. They start watching your actions more. They start respecting your time more. They start adjusting their energy around you because they can't predict your next sentence. And that kind of presence isn't created by speaking more. It's created by speaking strategically, by knowing when your voice is a tool and when your silence is the message. You don't need to correct every misconception. You don't need to defend your name in every conversation. If you know the truth, let them wonder, let them guess. Their assumptions are not your responsibility. Your energy is. And just because someone appears safe doesn't mean they are. Trust is not about how long you've known someone. It's about how well they handle pressure. Because that's when real motives surface. People are loyal until it's no longer convenient. They're supportive until your success triggers their insecurity. They're kind until you no longer serve their ego. If you haven't seen someone in discomfort, conflict, or correction, you don't truly know them. And if you don't truly know them, don't expose yourself to them. Keep the conversation surface level. Keep the plan internal. Keep your peace protected. There is a power in becoming unsearchable. When people can't pull up your pain, your plans, your process like a playlist, you become untouchable. That doesn't mean you're distant. It means you're deliberate. You choose depth with the right people and discernment with everyone else. You can be open-hearted without being open-doored. You can be kind and still guarded. You can care and still be careful. That balance, that discipline, is what keeps you sharp. Because once you expose everything, you have nothing left to protect. Every time you react, you expose something. Not just your feelings, but your triggers, your insecurities, your power leaks. The more emotional you are in public, the more insight people have into your inner world. And while the world tells you to express everything, there's a difference between emotional intelligence and emotional exposure. One builds presence, the other bleeds control. You're allowed to feel everything. You're just not obligated to show it all. Especially not to people who haven't earned the right to witness it. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. It means you're aware. It means you're processing, not performing. It means you've trained yourself to pause rather than explode, to observe rather than react, to filter rather than flood. Because the moment someone sees you flinch, they know how to push. The moment someone sees where you break, they know where to hit. And you might think you're just being real, being honest, being vulnerable. But to the wrong person, that's not transparency. That's target practice. Learn to feel your emotions without feeding your reactions. Because people will test you, intentionally or not. They'll push to see what moves you. And if you're easily rattled, if you take every comment personally, if you need to respond to every slight, you'll spend your entire life defending your peace instead of protecting it. That's the difference. Defending is reactive. Protecting is proactive. When you protect your emotions, you don't need to defend them. You don't need to explain why you're silent. You don't need to justify your distance. You don't need to prove that you're fine. You simply are. You're not icy. You're not cold. You're in control. People who move with control get misunderstood all the time. Because they're not easy to read. They're not loud. They don't post their pain. They don't explain their absence. They don't react when provoked. And in a world addicted to reaction, that kind of stillness is threatening. But don't let that pull you back into overexposing yourself just to make others comfortable. You're not here to reassure people by falling apart for them. You're not here to spill everything to be accepted. You're here to move with strength. And part of that strength is emotional discipline. Discipline isn't about shutting yourself down. It's about knowing when expression becomes exposure. Not every tear belongs in public. Not every frustration deserves a voice note. Not every wound should be tweeted. Because when you leak emotion constantly, you teach people how to get to you. You make your peace accessible. You make your weakness obvious. And that's not safety. That's sabotage. That's how you end up giving emotional control to people who don't have the maturity to hold it. The most powerful people in the room are rarely the loudest. They don't need to interrupt, overshare, or prove. They carry a calm that comes from knowing they're not here to react. They're here to observe, to calculate, to protect their emotional ground. That's what makes them magnetic. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they've mastered the space between stimulus and response. They know their nervous system. They've studied their own patterns. And they refuse to perform just because someone else is uncomfortable with their silence. When you're emotionally disciplined, you stop explaining yourself to people who misread your energy. You don't flinch when someone misunderstands you. You don't crumble when you're criticized. Because you've built a buffer. A space between what's said and how you choose to respond. That's not being guarded. It's being grown. It's choosing power over performance. It's protecting your inner world like it's sacred. Because it is. And not everyone deserves access to it. You don't owe them your unfiltered mind just because they asked a personal question. You don't owe them a reaction just because they threw a jab. You owe yourself peace. And that requires boundaries. The strongest boundaries are invisible. It's not always about saying, "Don't talk to me like that." Sometimes it's about not even engaging. About showing with your energy that you're not available for chaos. That you're not emotionally rentable. That your peace can't be provoked. The people who get it will adjust. The ones who don't will get louder. Let them. That's how you filter who respects your silence and who only respects your reaction. Train yourself to stay quiet when everything in you wants to speak. Train yourself to walk away when your ego wants to fight. Train yourself to sit in the tension without needing to fix it. That's how you get your power back. That's how you stop bleeding emotions all over people who never came to clean it up. Feel everything, but protect the signal. Protect the part of you that doesn't panic. That doesn't flinch. That doesn't react to every external noise. That's your edge. That's your weapon. That's how you stop exposing yourself emotionally to people who don't deserve the front row to your soul. If you want to command respect, you stop talking and start moving. You stop over-explaining your values and start living them. You stop announcing your strength and start walking in it. Words can be manipulated, energy cannot, and the people who command the most presence in a room aren't the ones who speak the most. They're the ones who move with intention. You can feel them before they speak. You can sense their clarity before they introduce themselves. Because presence doesn't need a platform. It speaks through behavior, through stillness, through boundaries that don't have to be shouted to be felt. When you constantly explain yourself, you water down your authority. You give away power in exchange for approval. You try to control perception instead of anchoring identity. But when you choose not to explain, when you don't justify your silence, when you hold your boundary without flinching, you force people to meet you with a different kind of awareness. They don't get to walk all over you because they're too busy trying to figure you out. And mystery, real, intentional mystery, is a form of psychological power. Not because you're hiding, but because you're grounded. You don't need to be seen to validate who you are. You already know that's what real presence is. It's not performance, it's certainty. It's the calm that comes from knowing you don't chase attention. You don't beg to be understood. You don't speak just to fill the silence. You speak when it matters. You act when it's time. And the people who move like that don't need to win every conversation. They don't need to clap back. They don't need to break themselves open just to prove they're real. Because they've learned that every time you overshare, you cheapen the power of what should be earned. When you move with quiet strength, you shift the atmosphere. Not because you're loud, but because your energy is heavy. It carries clarity. It carries control. It carries a kind of authority that doesn't rise and fall with opinion. And people notice. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. They watch how you sit. How you look them in the eye. How you don't fidget to make them more comfortable. That confidence doesn't come from being seen. It comes from self-respect. From doing the inner work quietly. From learning to hold your own presence without needing an audience. You stop needing to convince when you know what you stand on. The people who waste energy defending themselves constantly are the ones who haven't decided what's non-negotiable. When you have clarity, you don't need noise. You let people underestimate you. You let them misread you. Because their version of you is not your responsibility. Your job is not to be understood by everyone. Your job is to move in alignment. And alignment is often invisible. It's felt in how you handle tension. It's heard in what you don't say. It's shown in how little you reveal and how much you execution over exposure. That's the model. Not every thought needs to be tweeted. Not every win needs to be posted. Not every dream needs to be shared before it's built. When you move in silence, you build without distraction. You build without permission. You build without letting people insert their opinions into something that's still forming. Because exposure invites commentary, and commentary breaks momentum. But when no one knows what's coming, no one knows where to throw stones. That's how you build power. That's how you move in peace. That's how you protect the things that matter. If people can read you too easily, they can manipulate the narrative. But when you carry a presence that's unreadable, you put them on the back foot. They don't know how to approach you. They don't know where to press. That makes you powerful, not aggressive powerful. Because true power is calm. It doesn't need to broadcast itself. It doesn't need to perform. It simply exists, and it makes people respect the silence more than they'd ever respect the noise. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them guess who you are and what you're doing. Their confusion is not your problem, it's your advantage. Because when they can't figure you out, they can't prepare for you. They can't plan around you. They can't disarm what they don't understand. And the only way to create that space is to train yourself to stop narrating your life. Not because you're hiding, but because you've realized that visibility without intention is vulnerability, and vulnerability without boundaries is self-sabotage. So you choose silence. You choose presence. You choose to let your movement speak louder than your mouth ever will. People can only use what you give them. That's not just about your words. It's about your patterns, your tone, your presence, your silence. The more you reveal without discernment, the more power you put into someone else's hands. You think you're being honest, but what you're doing is handing over the script of how to control you. You think you're just venting, opening up, sharing. What you're really doing is exposing the emotional levers that can be pulled to manipulate you later. Not everyone wants to understand you so they can support you. Some want to understand you so they can manage you. so they can navigate you. So they can provoke you when it benefits them, disarm you when it's convenient, guilt you when it suits their ego. And the reason they're able to do that is because you've made yourself emotionally available to the wrong people. You've handed them the manual without checking if they even have the capacity to hold it with respect. Every time you let someone see your soft spots too early, you run the risk of mistaking proximity for trust. Just because they're close doesn't mean they're safe. Just because they nod while you talk doesn't mean they're listening with integrity. You need to be able to assess someone's character before you hand over your vulnerability. You need to watch how they treat other people's stories before you trust them with your own. And most importantly, you need to see how they act when you say no, when you disagree, when you're not useful to them. Because that's when the truth always surfaces. You don't get respect by being emotionally naked in front of people who haven't earned access. You get used. You get misread. You get reduced to the weakest version of yourself in their eyes. Because most people don't see depth. They see what's convenient. And if you hand them your pain without giving them the responsibility to hold it, don't be surprised when they fumble it. Don't be shocked when they weaponize it. They weren't built for it. They weren't trained for it. But you gave it anyway because your heart wanted to be seen more than it wanted to be safe. Protecting your emotions isn't the same as being cold. It's knowing that your story is sacred. It's not for entertainment. It's not for manipulation. It's not for someone else to twist or post or pass around like a casual conversation. What you've survived, what you carry, what you feel, that belongs to you first. And if someone isn't emotionally mature enough to respond with reverence, with steadiness, with loyalty, you have no obligation to keep them in your inner circle. Not everyone should have access. Not everyone should know how to reach you emotionally. That access is a privilege, and privileges must be earned. Stop mistaking false safety for real connection. Just because someone knows how to talk soft, ask deep questions, or listen without interrupting, doesn't mean they know how to protect what you reveal. People pretend to be safe all the time because safety earns trust, and trust gives power. But you won't know who's real until you pause, until you watch. Until you observe how they treat your distance, not your closeness. That's where people reveal their intent. Not when you're pouring your heart out, but when you hold back. If they get frustrated with your silence, they were never listening to understand. They were listening to control. If they punish you for being private, they were never after connection. They were after influence. And if they leave because you stopped oversharing, let them. You didn't lose a real one. You escaped a fake one, because someone who truly respects you doesn't need to know everything. They know you're more than what you reveal. They don't pressure you to expose. They protect your right to remain grounded. There is no weakness in withholding your feelings. There is wisdom. There is security. There is strategy. You can be honest without being exposed. You can be open without being disarmed. You can express yourself without giving someone the keys to break you apart. That's emotional intelligence. That's what it means to own your story without handing it away for validation. The people who value you won't require your full self up front. They'll let you unfold slowly. They'll sit with your silence. They'll respect the parts of you they haven't earned yet. And that's how you'll know who's real. Not by who listens, but by who protects what you never even had to say. Predictability is dangerous when you're trying to protect your peace. If people can predict your moves, they can control your rhythm. If they know exactly what you'll do when you're upset, they'll provoke it. If they know how you react when you feel disrespected, they'll bait you. And if they know your next step before you take it, they'll use that against you. That's not paranoia, it's pattern. And if you don't understand your own patterns, someone else will use them to write your script. People respect what they can't manipulate. And the only way to make sure you're not easy to manipulate is to stay unpredictable. You don't need to move erratically. You need to move intelligently. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become less obvious, less explainable, less emotionally exposed. When people can't guess how you'll respond, they start treating you more carefully. When they don't know if you'll engage, ignore, or walk away, they step lighter. That's not fear. That's respect. Because unpredictability creates boundaries. You don't even have to speak. You don't owe anyone a roadmap. You don't have to announce your next step to be seen as confident. Silence doesn't mean you don't have a plan. it means you're protecting it. The strongest strategies are the ones no one sees coming. And when your moves are loud before they're made, you give people time to interfere, time to prepare, time to poison what you haven't even finished building. Keep your structure private. Keep your progress quiet. Let your results walk into the room before your mouth does. People talk too much. They expose their intentions too fast. They think saying, "Watch what I'm about to do," is power. But it's not. It's noise. It gives everyone a front row seat to your pressure. It gives your critics a timeline, and it gives your enemies the blueprint. Real discipline isn't in declaration. It's in discretion. It's in moving without needing an audience. It's in showing up without needing applause. It's in building so deeply in private that by the time anyone notices, it's already done. You don't need to announce your every decision to feel like you're in control. You're in control when people can't see you coming. Unpredictability doesn't mean inconsistency. It means protecting your direction. It means being consistent with your values, but private with your process. People confuse those things. They think consistency means everyone should know every part of their routine, their timeline, their next launch, their private life. But consistency is about reliability and principle, not in predictability of behavior. You can be calm, composed, grounded, and still unknown. You can be consistent and still unreadable. That balance is the key to being respected. Because once people figure you out, they stop treating you like a force. You become familiar. And familiarity in the wrong hands leads to entitlement. People start expecting explanations. They start assuming your boundaries will flex. They assume your emotions are accessible. But when you hold back, when you stay unreadable, when you control the narrative by giving nothing away, now you're in charge. Now they have to move around you, not the other way around. Now they have to guess, not demand. And that guessing creates space. It creates hesitation. And inside that hesitation is where you build your power. There's something powerful about being hard to read. It makes people pay attention. They can't tune you out because they can't figure you out. They watch more closely. They ask more carefully. They engage with more awareness. You don't get talked over. You don't get dismissed. Because no one knows what you're thinking. And that makes every word you say more valuable. That's not manipulation. It's control. And control is necessary when you're protecting something as valuable as your peace, your purpose, your time, your next chapter. Predictable people are easily dismissed. You say something once, and they've already tuned you out because they know what's coming next. You take a stand, and they're already prepared to twist it. But when you move differently, when your energy doesn't match what they expected, when your choices don't follow their assumptions, they're forced to reevaluate. That's how you reset the tone. That's how you keep people aligned. Not through force, but through mystery, through unpredictability, through silence. Let them wonder if they still have access. Let them question if they still know you. Let them sit with uncertainty about your next move. That's where your edge is. That's how you stop people from thinking they can predict you like a pattern. The less they know, the more they respect. The less they expect, the more they adjust. And when people start adjusting to your silence instead of reacting to your noise, you've taken control back without ever raising your voice. Just because someone's in your life doesn't mean they belong in your depth. Access is not intimacy. Presence is not permission. Proximity doesn't equal privilege. You've got to stop confusing closeness with connection. Stop giving people the best of you just because they're standing next to you. Emotional access is earned, not granted by default. Not everyone can handle the weight of who you are. Not everyone deserves to see what's behind your composure. And if you keep handing yourself over to people who haven't shown capacity, all you're doing is inviting misunderstanding and emotional exhaustion. There are people who will take your vulnerability and turn it into a mirror for their own insecurities. They'll misread your honesty as weakness. They'll use your openness to lower your value in their eyes. And then you'll find yourself wondering why they stopped respecting you after you shared more. It's because you gave them a version of you they weren't prepared for. They liked the surface, they liked the role. They didn't want the layers, or they wanted the performance. So when you gave them depth, they didn't know what to do with it. That's not your failure. It's your cue to start filtering again. You have to understand that most people only know how to engage on the level they live on. If someone lives in chaos, they won't honor your stillness. If someone lives in ego, they'll be threatened by your truth. If someone hasn't confronted their own pain, they won't respect how you navigate yours. That's why you must stop expecting everyone to meet you at your level of emotional maturity. Stop bleeding depth into shallow waters. Stop expecting peace from people who live in drama. And stop exposing your inner world to people who only came for the highlight reel. Your internal world is sacred. It is not public property. It is not a playground for other people's curiosity. It is not a stage for others to dissect, fix, or judge. If they didn't earn your trust through consistency, patience, and presence, they don't deserve your story. If they haven't proven themselves in moments of tension, silence, or conflict, don't hand them your emotions. Because when things go sideways, the first thing exposed will be what you shared too soon. And once your soul has been misunderstood by someone careless, you'll learn the importance of keeping it protected. You don't owe your depth to anyone. You don't have to explain your boundaries. You don't need to make people comfortable with your privacy. Let them call you guarded. Let them say you're hard to read. Let them misunderstand your distance. That's the price of protection. That's what it means to carry emotional discipline. Because when you start opening up for validation, you expose yourself to manipulation. And people can't weaponize what they don't know. The less they know, the less they can distort. The less they know, the more they have to approach with respect. The people who genuinely respect you won't need your full blueprint. They won't rush your story. They won't press you for access. They'll be patient. They'll earn your depth through consistency. They'll honor your silence and never take it personally. They'll pay attention to what you don't say, and they'll never demand more than you're ready to give. That's the difference. Real ones don't make you feel exposed. They make you feel safe. Even when you're quiet. Especially when you're quiet, stop letting guilt convince you to overshare. Stop letting loneliness open doors to the wrong people. Stop letting temporary emotions make permanent exposures. That moment when you want to vent, when you want to feel seen, when you're craving connection, that's when you pause. That's when you ask yourself, have they earned this part of me? If the answer is no, you stay silent, you journal, you pray, you sit with yourself, you process alone. Because every time you bypass that question, you risk handing a sharp weapon to someone with shaky hands. Your soul is not a conference room. Not everyone needs to be invited in. Protect it like it's sacred. Let people earn their way in through consistency, not through charm. Through their actions under pressure, not through sweet words and convenience. Watch how they handle your no. Watch how they react when you say less. Watch how they shift when you stop giving them access. That's the test. That's the filter, and most won't pass. But the few who do, those are the ones you build with. Everyone else, let them stay outside the gates. They weren't meant to see the fortress behind your face. When you stop exposing yourself to anyone who looks interested, you start regaining power. You start walking in rooms without needing to explain your silence. You start creating a standard for connection. You start feeling peace instead of regret. Because now, instead of giving everything to everyone, you're choosing to give the right parts of yourself to the right people. That's not cold, that's clarity. That's not arrogance. That's awareness. That's not distance, that's discernment.